Wednesfield to buy their traps. There was one particular person who always went there to buy his traps. His name was Victor Trap, because he used to use his traps to catch people. Trap was a giant, a massive giant. He used to come to Wednesfield in his massive barge down the canal. He used to tie up on the bollard, and he will sail the towpath into town, and he will say, "Have you got my traps?" And he'd hand over just a little bit of money, and he'd take his traps back and load them on his barge and sail away down the canal, back to trap the people of Tipton, trap the people of Wolverhampton, to trap all the people in the West Midlands. And when they got caught in the good Wednesfield traps, he used to pick them out and eat them. Munch, munch, munch. Well, the Wednesfield people didn't like Victor Trap because they knew that when he'd run out of people elsewhere, he'd start chewing on them. So they all thought, "We've got to get rid of Victor Trap. We've got to kill him somehow. But how can we do it? Let's call a meeting," they said. They all went down to Wednesfield Community Centre. They were all crammed inside the place, all of them in there, every last one of them. Even Jacks the navvy, who used to cut the canal, he was there. I couldn't even speak straight, but they let him in. He was there, and everyone was talking and moaning and groaning about Victor Trap. Well, what would they do? Well, as many people as was in that room, there was as many ideas that came forward, and none of them seemed like good ones. Everyone was scratching their heads and just about to give up when Jacks and Harry stood up. Everyone went, "Oh no!" Because when Jack started talking, every word came out twice. He'd stutter, he'd stammer, he'd go on and on. It would take him a month to say something anyone else could say in a few seconds, but he seemed very, very keen. He was almost hopping up and down when he stood up and said these words: "Trap, trap, barge, barge, lock, lock, key, key, jack, jack, cut, cut." And then they thought, "He's got a point, you know. He's got a point." Because the people of Wednesfield aren't stupid. You don't get stupid making the best traps in the world. They saw what he meant immediately, and so they went up to those 4 logs. Up to those 4 logs you can see on the Wednesfield Way now. And they waited for Victor Traps, for they were going to trap traps. And when he tied up his barge to that big bollard, they didn't even wait for him to get out. They snuck up and undid his rope, and the barge was floating still around the canal. And what did they do? They were going to trap traps. They barged the barge into the lock. They had to lock the lock. So they went to the key by the key and took the key by the key and locked the lock. And as they locked the lock, well, poor old Victor Trap, he couldn't get his massive barge back up the canal. He just had to leave it in the lock, and the only way out was down. But at the same time, Jacks, well, he went to cut. He went to get his spade, but no one was better with his spade than Jacks. And he went to the side of the can, and he began to cut. And the water started to fill his trench, and the water in the lock went down, and that giant was so angry. All they could do was go down into the next lock before all the water escaped. So they trapped, they barged into the lock, and they locked the lock with the key by the key, and Jacks cut the cut deeper, and more water escaped. The barge with Vic the Trap went lower and lower into the second lock, and in the end all he could do was go down into the third lock. They barged the barge into the lock and locked the lock with the key by the key, and Jacks cut the cut deeper, and more water escaped. Vic the Trap, all he could do was open the gates and go down into the fourth lock. So I barged the barge into the lock, and I locked the lock with the key by the key, and Jacks cut the cut deeper, and all the water went down till there was nowhere left for Vic the Trap to go. So they barged the barge into the lock, and I locked the lock with the key by the key, and Jacks cut the cut deeper, and all the water flowed out on Wednesfield Way. There was no canal left, just a big pit with Vic the Trap on his board. All of the people got their spades and covered Vic the Trap up with mud and buried him right there where he was. But mud wasn't enough. They got tarmac and they got concrete and they covered him over. Then they invited everyone to come along with their horse-drawn carts and ride them over the top of it, so that never would be any time there was some sort of car or lorry or vehicle running over the top of Vic the Trap.